Welcome and thank you for volunteering to be a peer reviewer. My name is Terry Bennett and I'm here with other members of our high school success team at the Oregon Department of Education. I'll have them introduce themselves now.
My name is Tina Lynch. I'm the project manager on this team.
Tara Hernandez. Cassie Medina.
And I'm Jan McCoy.
This webinar is for peer reviewers of high school success plans. What we would ask as you go through this webinar, if you have questions, go ahead and type those questions in and we'll take time throughout the webinar to answer those questions. We'll also ask throughout the webinar if there are questions and you can go ahead and type those in as well. The purpose of this training is to provide an overview of high school success, highlight the importance of applying the Oregon equity lens to each aspect of the plan, identify the purpose and role of peer reviewer, highlight our data sheets, review the plan and the tool itself, discuss effective written feedback. We will welcome, again, any questions that you have, and we'll pause throughout this webinar. So what is high school success? It was a ballot measure that was passed in November of 2016 with 65% voter support. During the current year, we have a total of 255 recipients. Those are school districts, charter schools, youth corrections, and juvenile detention. The spirit of the measure was to provide funding to establish or expand around 3 programmatic areas: dropout prevention strategies, career and technical education, college-level educational opportunities. Additionally, recipients are able to use 15% of their allocation. This 15% is not required, but it's available for services to students during their 8th grade year. That's interpreted as the beginning with the completion of your 7th grade year. So the day after they finish their 7th grade year, through that summer, and then through all of their 8th grade year. It's important to recognize that written inside the measure is how ODE is to evaluate the program. The intent of high school success is to improve students' progress towards graduation beginning with grade 9, freshmen on track, increase the graduation rates of high schools, and improve high school graduates' readiness for college and career.
The Oregon Equity Lens was vetted by more than 60 organizations and individuals throughout the state, including high school students. Feedback from the organizations added clarity and guided the development of our core beliefs, which we've summarized here. Every student has the ability to learn. Speaking a language other than English is an asset. Special education services are an educational responsibility. Students previously described as at risk are the best opportunity to improve outcomes. Intentional, proven practices must be implemented to return out-of-school youth to an educational setting. Supporting great teachers is important. Ending disparities and gaps in achievement begin in quality delivery. Resource allocation demonstrates priorities and values. Shared decision-making with communities will improve outcomes. All students should have access to information about future opportunities. Community colleges and universities play a critical role in serving diverse, rural, and ELL communities. Rich history and culture is an asset to celebrate. By utilizing the Oregon Equity Lens, we aim to provide a common vocabulary and a guide for decision-making. Building a culture of equity requires asking questions through an equity lens and crafting meaningful space for dialogue to ensure that programs, policies, and systems built are done so in a manner in which learners' needs are met. As a reviewer, you will want to keep these questions in mind as you review plans. Listed for you are those questions. Who are the racial or ethnic and underserved groups affected? What is the potential impact of the resource allocation and strategic investment to these groups? Does the decision being made ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended consequences? What is the impact on eliminating the opportunity gap? How does the investment or resource allocation advance the 40-40-20 goal? What are the barriers to more equitable outcomes? How have you intentionally involved stakeholders who are also members of the communities affected by the strategic investment or resource allocation? How will you modify or enhance your strategies to ensure each learner and community's individual and cultural needs are met? How are you collecting data on race, ethnicity, and native language? What is your commitment to P20 professional learning for equity? What resources are you allocating for training and cultural responsive instruction? What are the education districts or service areas, as well as the local organizations, doing to solicit local tribal input? Equity is an important issue in the use of Measure 98 funds. Recipients applied the Oregon Equity Lens during self-assessment when considering eligibility and will be used as we review plans. Improved outcomes are expected to be expanded beyond the population that has been served to include specific student populations for whom the current system does not work. This is intended to target historically and currently marginalized students, and that those should be identified through data-informed planning by each recipient. That is, data should be reviewed to see how student populations are performing. So why is high school success so important? This graph illustrates the 2013-2014 graduation rate situated inside the 2016-17 data. As you can see, graduation rates have slightly improved, but there is room for much more growth. An additional point to make with this is the disparities that are evident between student populations. Do we have any questions so far?
We do have one question here. In training, I remember being told that I need to write a summary of how we plan to address the eligibility requirements in that section of the application. In the first application that I have read, the school wrote more of a, sorry, we're having a little trouble reading the whole thing here. A description of an activity. Are we looking for how they will address eligibility requirements in that box? There is a space for them to address an eligibility goal and then to associate activities with that goal. It doesn't specifically say that they need to talk about, how might I put this? It doesn't say you have to describe, here's the group, here's the action, here's the group, here's the action, but rather that the goal is we're going to improve equity in our district in this way, or meet eligibility requirements in our district in this way, and then provide activities that are going to lead toward that. So it doesn't call for a statement of equity or anything like that that says we attest to the fact that we are going to be equitable. It simply says you need to describe how you're going to meet eligibility. It's important to note too that you may not need to address any of the eligibility in the self-assessment. If they indicated that they have in fact met all of the eligibility requirements, there won't be any required eligibility inclusion.
Great question.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
Well, we'll move on now. So, Tara? Excuse me, Jan?
There you go.
My other Tara.
The plan consists of 5 components. We've asked for a vision, response to eligibility requirements that have been identified, as I said earlier, through the self-assessment, goals, activities, and then outcomes, both short-term and long-term. It is important to note we're not requiring that you read the self-assessment. It leads the plan, so the first 51 questions are around self-assessment, and you're welcome to read those if you think it will help to inform your effort with the review. But those responses have already been reviewed, and you're not required to do anything with them. The vision is to be a clear and concise, and it says 75 words or less, description of the embedded practices the recipient is currently doing or will be doing in order to address how outcomes will change. That is most importantly for students who are not being served by the current system. The 75-word limit is not a hard and fast limit. We've had people contact us and ask, could I go 90? Can I go 110? Yes, but a vision really ought to be a simple and straightforward statement. And it should set up the follow-on goals and activities. We mentioned there's some eligibility requirements. Eligibility requirements include those listed on the slide you see. These were addressed, as I said, in the self-assessment that assisted recipients in identifying which areas of eligibility they need to address. A component of the planning process is to identify how the recipient is going to address the areas of eligibility they still need to put in place. In the plan, you'll see a statement as you move into the beginning of the plan that says, these are the areas of eligibility you need to address. You, the plan creator, you'll want to look for those things being addressed in the plan itself. The eligibility includes teacher collaboration time around data. Does the plan provide sufficient time for teachers and staff of students in grade 9 to review data on students' grades, absences, and discipline by school and by course, and to develop strategies to ensure at-risk students stay on track to graduate? It does require that it address grade 9. We'd be thrilled if people said they're going to be looking at these things across all grades, but the law only requires grade 9. Next up, practices to reduce chronic absenteeism. Are there district-wide evidence-based practices for reducing chronic absenteeism in grades 9 through 12 embedded in the plan? This ought to address all groups. That is, it may well be that as a whole, the students don't have a problem with an apparent problem in the data with chronic absenteeism, but if you look into smaller populations, there may well be some areas that need to be targeted. Equitable assignment to advanced courses. Is it identified in the plan how high school students will be assigned to advanced and college level courses based on multiple academic qualifications that avoid bias in course assignments? Next up, systems ensuring on-time graduation. The plan identifies how systems will be implemented to ensure that high school students, including English language learners, are taking courses required for on-time graduation. Then finally, partnerships. To the extent appropriate to local contexts, partnerships with others, nonprofits, federally recognized tribes, community organizations, trade and industry partners, colleges and universities, whomever the local community has as a resource that might be a valuable partner. During the self-assessment, recipients identified these areas of eligibility by noting across a scale. The scale included embedded, so ingrained in their work that it is a distinguished feature of their culture. Practicing, that is, it's a regular practice that they do on a regular basis. Emerging, that is, that they're working to begin implementing it, or it's underway, but it's not an embedded or even solid practice yet. Or not yet. They have not started work in this area. Eligibilities that have been flagged as emerging or not yet must be addressed in the plan. It's not critical that they address how they're going to get there during the next school year, however. All areas of eligibility must be fully in place at the high school level by the end of 2020-2021 school year. So they have 3 years to make this happen. They should, however, be working toward that implementation already. As you do your plan review, you'll need to take a look at the goals and the activities to support those goals. The goals and activities portion of the plan is intended to create specific goals and align activities to those goals that will encourage progress toward the goals. The final component of the plan is to identify the outcomes that are intended, both short and long term. For many districts, and we have said this over and over again, the short-term outcomes emphasize a change in adult behaviors that will ultimately pave the way for long-term outcomes. That is, short-term outcomes should focus on what you're going to change within the system and how might you measure those changes, with long-term outcomes measuring the impact of those changes. And at this point, we'll ask, are there any questions that you might need to address?
One of the questions that has come up in some other trainings is if I get into the plan and I'm reviewing and I have to step away, is there a way for me to save my work? And there is. At the bottom of the review tool, there's a button that says save a draft. And so you'll be able to save that draft and then come back to it. You'll have that option to take care of it that way. So you don't have to worry about, do I have to sit and get it all done in one session. Next, I have Tara Hernandez.
Purpose of peer review. Now that you have a better understanding of what high school success is, we can begin to identify the purpose of peer review and ultimately your role as a peer reviewer. Peer reviewers were called upon to ensure that all components of the law are embedded in each recipient's high school success plan. Your role as a peer reviewer is to take a critical look at each high school success plan you are assigned and ensure that the equity lens has been applied to the plan, ensure that the plan addresses the appropriate eligibility requirements that were identified through the recipient's self-assessment, ensure the plan is focused on the required number of programmatic areas as determined by each recipient's funding level, identify potential areas of support, and provide written feedback to recipients. High school success funds. It is important to note that the high school success funds are not competitive. Every recipient is entitled to their funds, though they need to meet the requirements of the law. ODE staff has the responsibility to ensure that each district is available to provide an approvable plan. As a peer reviewer, your responsibility is to assist ODE in determining which plans are approvable and which ones may need additional discussion. Funding and programmatic areas. Is every recipient required to address all 3 programmatic areas in every school? No. The revision of the law by legislature during the 2017 regular session created a tiered system for the 3 programmatic areas based upon funding levels. Recipients that received less than $100,000 in the first year of biennium funding may choose to address any or all of the 3 areas, as is appropriate to local need. Those who received between $100,000 but less than $350,000 must address career and technical education and one of the other 2 areas, but may address all 3. Finally, recipients funded $350,000 must implement all 3 areas. Now we'll look at some of the data displays that we have provided for you. There is data available for you to assist in evaluating the submitted plans. The data presented was submitted by school districts during the 2016-17 school year. Please note an asterisk will appear in lieu of data when a student population has been suppressed to ensure student confidentiality. The data displays include some definitions to assist in interpreting the data. Here, we have an example showing State of Oregon data. Note the 2017-18 funding allocation is displayed at the top of this data page for you to reference. The first part of the data display provides a demographic breakdown for each recipient. The second part includes graphs showing graduation, freshmen on track, dropout, and absenteeism rates for each recipient, both overall and for each numerically significant student population. Again, an asterisk will appear in lieu of data when a student population has been suppressed to ensure student confidentiality. Depending on the size of the recipient, data may be displayed in 1 or 2 graphs. The blue column indicates the recipient's overall rate, while the colored dots represent different student population rates. Some areas to look for include student populations with unusually low graduation, freshmen on track rates, or unusually high dropout or absenteeism rates. Recipients may need to evaluate and address these possible problematic areas. What we are looking for is that recipients use their data to inform their decision making. Again, we are checking in for questions to see if you have any before we jump into the plan and review tool. I do not see any questions, so we will move on.
So as a reviewer, you'll receive an email like this. You'll want to click on the Go to Site box. Now, some of you, we've received some emails that the invitation, we can't find it, we couldn't find it where it is. You're going to want to check your spam or junk email box, because what we've learned is many filters have kicked it in, because this does come from a SurveyMonkey Apply, and so the filters on your system has probably sent it there. So if you haven't received it, again, check your spam or junk email box. Once you've clicked on the Go to Site, you're going to see this next page. So if you were an applicant and a reviewer, you'll have two blue boxes. You're going to click into the reviewer, and if you're only a reviewer, you'll have one box, and you'll want to click on the one reviewer box. Next, you'll have this screen will come up. It'll show the number of plans that have been assigned to you to review. You'll click on the Start box, and then you'll get to this screen. This screen will actually list your plans. So if you have 2 plans assigned to you or 3 plans, it'll list those plans. And where it says continued on the screen, you're going to want to click that. It'll say Start. Continue will show is when you've saved a draft and come back to it, it'll show continue, and that's where you'll be able to get into your draft to continue that plan. And then finally, you open up into this split screen. So what you see on the split screen is you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, you will actually see the review tool. At the top of this picture, it says Application Review. On the left-hand side, you'll see 2 boxes there. One says Summary, and the other one says Application. You're going to want to click into the Application box.
Please read through the conflict of interest statement. If reviewing this recipient's plan is a conflict for you, please click the I have a conflict of interest and cannot continue button. This will bring up a stop sign. If you have a conflict of interest, this stop sign will pop up below the statement. Please click below to send an email to ODE's High School Success Team, alerting us to reassign this recipient's plan for review and to assign you a new one. On the left-hand side, you have 2 buttons, Summary and Application. Please click the Application button. Now with this split screen, you have the review tool on the right-hand side and the recipient's plan on the left. As you begin the review process, we would advise you to read through the plan completely prior to using the review tool. You may want to take some notes as you seek to gain understanding of the overall plan. A few things to note. There is a Jump To box in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. You can use this feature to skip ahead to specific sections of the plan instead of using the scroll feature. Number 2, we are not asking you to review the recipient's self-assessment. Using the Jump To box, you can jump down to the application round to begin reading the plan. The arrows on the right side of the plan, not the review tool, will allow you to minimize that section. And lastly, when reading through the plan, remember we are not asking you to review the budget at the end of the plan.
We have provided the following rubric tool to help guide your review of the plan. The first section of the plan to review will be the vision and involvement of stakeholders. If you feel the recipient has effectively engaged stakeholders in the development of the plan and vision, and that it is fully embedded and/or fully meets the high school success expectations, you would click the Yes box, and the green light on the stoplight will come on. If it was somewhat or partially embedded and/or not fully meeting the high school success expectations, you would click the box and the yellow light would come on. And if it was not embedded in the plan and/or not meeting the high school success expectations, the red light would come on. We're now moving into the eligibility review rubric portion. You will be using the same rubric format when you review eligibility requirements. Under the heading Eligibility Requirements are gray boxes with the required areas of eligibility that must be addressed in the plan. As you determine whether items listed under each eligibility requirements are embedded or not in the plan, keep in mind recipients are only required to address eligibility areas that were determined as not being fully embedded or practicing by their self-assessment. You may need to reread sections of the plan to determine how fully in place each required area is within the eligibility component. For eligibility requirements that recipients reported as fully in place in their self-assessment, click the green highlighted sentence box. If the recipient did not address an eligibility requirement that was required by their self-assessment, click the red highlighted sentence box. At the end of each page, you will be given an opportunity to provide written feedback. Now we will move on to the programmatic areas of the rubric. You will be using the same rubric format when you review programmatic areas. Remember, programmatic areas are based upon funding allocations. Begin by indicating which of the 3 programmatic areas of the plan is to be addressed. This is located at the beginning of the plan under the vision box. The recipient will list the programmatic areas they will be addressing. You will determine whether items listed under each programmatic area are fully embedded in the plan. If all boxes are checked, the stoplight will be green. Some of the boxes checked, yellow, and if none are checked, red. Again, you may need to reread sections of the plan to determine how fully in place each required area is within the programmatic area. You only have to review programmatic areas that the recipient identified as areas in their plan. Example, if they only had to address 1 or 2 areas, then the non-addressed areas, stoplights, will be left red. At the end of each page, you will be given an opportunity to provide written feedback. The next piece of the rubric will be the overall area. You will be using the same rubric format for the overall review. First, review the goals and check all of the appropriate boxes. Remember, goals are founded on areas of growth identified in recipient self-assessment, that they clearly define what the recipient wants to accomplish and should be specific, attainable, and measurable. Next, you will review the activities and determine if they are tied to the goals, engaging stakeholders, and are connected to outcomes, short-term and long-term outcomes. You will check each of the following items that apply to the plan. The stoplight will function the same as during prior section reviews. We are then asking you to check yes or no if any aspect of the plan represents an exemplar, and if it would be valuable to share with other recipients. In the written feedback box, provide a brief note describing what makes this an exemplar, as well as general comments addressing the plan holistically, including the sections you just reviewed. When you finish with your feedback, click Submit. Throughout the 3 pages of the review, you are always able to save a draft and return to the review at a later time. Are there any questions?
Actually, there are several questions.
We have several questions, and we will start going through them.
Could you define Ever English learners?
Ever English learners are people who have English as a second language for them, and for whom they either are currently or have ever received treatment, instruction, however you might want to term it, under the English Language Learner Program. So whether they're currently English learners or have been in the past English language learners, they're retained in that group.
Thank you. With the equity lens guiding questions, can you provide an example of what that looks like and how it is measured?
So if you go back and look at the data that we have provided for each of the plans that you are reviewing, using the equity lens and looking at their data side by side will help guide you in reviewing the plan. They should be addressing specific areas and specific demographics of students that are either chronically absent or dropping out. I hope that answers that. If not, go ahead and type another question in there if that didn't answer your question.
A couple of other questions we have is, where would you find the data files? And so in the email that we sent to you is a link that would get you to resources. And so that was in the kickoff email. And in those that email, that link opens up several things. One of which it opens up, will show data files, and they're listed alphabetically. And so I think there are 5 batches. And so you would find your recipient, and then you'd click on that link, and that would take you to the data files and be able to search for your recipient based upon that alphabet. The next question we had is the PowerPoint available on the website? And so on that same link, there are 2 prior recordings that weren't webinars, which is one is similar to the webinar that we're doing today. Another one is a recording that takes you just into the review tool itself. And then Tuesday's webinar is linked there as well. And then we'll record this and put that on that page as well.
I do want to point out that the resources are not available on the ODE website. That's not the place to go looking. You need to look at the emails we've sent, not the invitations. Those are coming directly from the system. But we've sent you several announcement emails, probably 3 by now. And each of those had a link to that resource document. It's a Google Doc, and it just provides a series of links to other documents that are available as resources to you.
Okay.
Next up, we want to talk about written feedback. Authentic feedback is an important component of any learning cycle. At the end of each section of the review, there's an opportunity to provide written feedback. It may look like a small box, but just as a test, we put 4 chapters of a book in one of those, and it worked just fine. So there's lots of space if you need to add longer feedback than it appears we're encouraging. We encourage you to give feedback that is supportive and coaching in nature. The feedback should include both positive and negative observations, while remembering to limit the amount of information to that the recipient can use. We encourage you to use the following model. Equity is the foundation upon which all high school success plans are built. As you review plans and look to provide feedback, please keep in mind the Oregon Equity Lens, the beliefs and questions. A link to the Equity Decision Tool Pocket version has been provided among those resources I was just describing. Feedback should be educative in nature. The purpose of feedback is to provide information the recipient can act upon, to clear up misunderstandings, or to provide clarity. Please be sensitive to the individual need of the recipient. Assume that they have worked hard on their plan and that they've given it their best effort. All feedback should come from a place of assuming best intent. Feedback should reference a specific component of the plan. Specificity is key. Be careful about giving blanket statements. Rather, call out specific components of the plan and make genuine suggestions, or cite authentic wonderings. Give genuine praise. If a component of the plan is praiseworthy, praise that part of the plan, but do not force the praise on something that is not genuine. Provide a model or example. As you give feedback, if you had a similar experience or know of research that would be beneficial to connect the recipient to, provide it. Finally, ask for clarification. Even though, as a reviewer, you will not receive a response, asking for clarification causes the recipient to consider things he or she may not have considered before. It causes one to take a closer look at the plan in order to be more intentionally articulate. We cannot overemphasize, and we've already stated, this is not a competitive review. We are not trying to eliminate any funding. We're not eliminating any of the applications. What we're looking for is guidance to the applicant as to what they might do to improve their plans, and some guidance to ODE staff as we work with the applicants as well.
One of the things you might do if you want, you can type your feedback in a Word doc. So if you're more comfortable using that, you could type up your feedback and then capture that and copy and paste into the review tool.
These items are the resources I mentioned that are available from the link that was in the email you've received. If you've not received that or have misplaced it, we've actually already gotten several requests to resend that, and we're happy to do so. You won't get all of this. What you'll get is a link that takes you to a page that includes all of these things. So you'll get information further about the equity lens and the pocket version of questions, the PowerPoint that you're viewing right now, High School Success Plan feedback guidance, which is some samples of how we think you might best provide feedback, the data that we talked about, an FAQ specific to reviewing the plans, as well as you see at the bottom, an FAQ more generally across high school success, and then some technical support on how to use the review tool in case you have some challenges there. Peer reviews have begun, starting on April the 10th. We're anticipating completion no later than April the 24th, close of business. If you have questions that are not answered in this training, or if you come across a question as you begin your reviews, please contact High School Success at 503-947-5796 or by email at hssuccess@state.or.us. That's better than sending a note to an individual who's been part of this presentation because it's being monitored by several of us. So that if someone's out of the office, your request won't be overlooked. We realize this is a tight timeline, and we want to make sure we're on top of any requests for assistance. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've been happy with how we've done this. It's been an interesting experience with the interruption. I'm very pleased to see that some of you are still with us. A link to the video will be coming out to those of you who've participated, so you'll know where to get the information. Thank you very much.